Thank you. We're very nearly winding up. There's a question here about overseas development, and I would like to invite you to give very brief replies to this. I realise it's a huge topic, but could I call on Claire Crawford to pose her question? They're all behind me.
Two mics, thank you. Can I have my question?
Oh, yes.
I also came too late to know what I was supposed to do. So, could I ask the candidates, if elected, and what would you do to ensure that the UK keeps its promise to give 0.7% of national income to international development?
I've forgotten to Jeremy.
Well,
briefly, please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. David Cameron has said that despite the very difficult spending environment that we find ourselves in, the budget for international development and the NHS budget are the two budgets that he will commit to ring fencing. The NHS budget, incidentally, just to respond to something that Mike said earlier, Mike was saying that we've got to cut out the waste. I couldn't agree with him more, having seen what I've seen in the way the local health services operate. But that's for a very simple reason, which is that we are an ageing population. And the demands on the NHS as we age more are going to increase exponentially. And realistically, if we're going to meet those obligations, we are going to need to cut waste, but we are also going to need to sustain spending. International development is a tiny part of overall government spending, but this is a global movement to increase the amount of aid to 0.7%. And if the UK reneges on that pledge, there will be a knock-on effect. That will allow every country in the world that's signed up to 0.7% to renege on it, which is why we've decided it would be wrong to renege on that. I personally am very committed to that. I set up a small charity that helps children with HIV in Kenya before I came into politics. That happened because I happened to start sponsoring a small girl who had HIV. That's been a very important part of my life. And that is one interest that I've been able to keep going as an MP. And one of the things I'm most proud of, it's a small thing, but I managed to persuade a constituent from southwest Surrey to give £250,000 to build a secondary school in Kenya for children with HIV, and that was a fantastic act of generosity, and I was very, very proud to have played a very small part in that.
Thank you. I have the slight advantage of having received a longer version of this question as one of the party questions, so I've had time to think about it. And there are two things. Do you remember I told you that I'm a spiritualist? And there's our lessons that we learn on our journey include the right to choose to be born into a life of poverty, to learn that decision. And then you have people who choose to help people in whether it be locally or whether it be from internationally. You have the right to choose to help people, right? The second thing that I think is important to say is you have to read Professor Yunus's book. Professor Yunus was the Nobel Peace Prize winner, joint Nobel Peace Prize winner in 2006 with the Grameen Microloan Bank. And to gain effective help
Sorry, Luke,
people...
can you answer the question about the 0.7%?
The money has to be focused in ways in which it will be effective. And if you read, I think, I'll leave it to you.
But you would keep to that promise?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Roger.
Interesting person you are. It raises the whole question of altruism, doesn't it? Which is a thing that never occurs in nature, it only occurs in human beings, and something I'd be fascinated to debate further. But I take your point about the best thing that can possibly happen with international aid is to get it down to monetary contributions to individual people as opposed to financing institutions abroad. Because it doesn't matter what schemes you set up, there's corruption to begin with, and also in the end they don't have the effect. It's small amounts of money to individual farmers and families and people like that. That is the way I would want to aim. But anyway, UKIP would keep to the existing commitment.
Thank you.
Well, similarly, as anyone who becomes a Labour MP in the next Parliament will have no difficulty keeping the Labour government to this commitment. It's hardwired into our thinking in the manifesto, and I think most Labour MPs will probably be trying to make the case to increase it. Like the last question on climate change, international development is something that was a strong driver in the very first years of the Labour administration. We created a whole new government department of international development, which took the issue out of the old Foreign Office and gave it not only its own department, but more importantly, its own seat around the cabinet table, which may sound like a bit of furniture removal, but when that person sat in that seat is Claire Short, then you were pretty sure that those policies were going to get driven through, and indeed they were. Just one other thing on this, it's not only the amount of money one gives in aid, it's, as it's been said, it's making sure that's well spent, and I think the government has a very strong record. We can always work harder to ensure that it's being well spent in recipient countries, but also dropping debt. The decision following the successful Drop the Debt campaign some years ago, Gordon Brown made the decision to unshackle many developing countries, and 40 have been unshackled.
The answer, yes.
Debt. Yes.
And by giving the answer yes. But there are other things that need to be done, and Richard's quite right to point out we need to be looking at the huge debts of the poorest countries in the world, and some of those countries need to have 100% of their debt relieved. And also, actually, we need fair trade, don't we? You know, and actually the benefits and the advantages, the skewed market for agriculture that is enjoyed by Western countries, by the EU, dare I say, I might actually agree with Roger on this one, is totally unfair to people in the developing world. And so that has got to be addressed as well. So there's a range of things that need to be done to help lift these people and lift these countries out of poverty. And I find, if I think of countries, there's many countries in the world with oil supplies where there are people living next to the oil wells in abject poverty. That cannot be right. And it's got to do with the political system there, and it's got to do with profiteering by the oil companies, and it's got to do with the way that trade is structured, and it has to be addressed. So there's a range of things that need to be done.